Okay, so this presentation is just a little brief on the book and where we are with it. So, the project, the thing is when you Google for a book on APL, what do you get? Nothing. Well, that's not entirely true. The latest edition of anything printed is from '96. And of all the books you get, which is about 3 or 4, only APL2 at a glance has the second generation arrays explained in them. So, yes. Yeah. What was I was just thinking something, I forgot it now. So, most people, and I know many of our customers, still hand out Gilman and Rose. And Carlo Alberto Spinici from Italy one day came across a desk of one of his new recruits, and he looked at the code in that book, and maybe back then it was state of the art, but these days you don't code that way. It was like naked branching and branching to constant line numbers and stuff like that. So he got horrified. We've had more than 700 educational downloads, and these young people need to be able to find something that'll allow them to study APL. So the hunt for a writer started. Who should write this new book? I guess all of us who work for Sharp still remember Paul Barry's book, which was excellent. The manual, the Sharp manual, you could actually read that and learn APL from that. But maybe most people need a more gradual introduction. So fortunately, the young recruit, Nicolas Delcroix, we made from France, declared that he had self-studied APL, and he's pretty good at it, from Bernard Legrand's previous book. So we decided to investigate this Bernard Legrand. You used to be a reseller for Dyalog, but to Morten and I, you were sort of not entirely well known. So luckily, Bernard was very excited and eager to help us. And together with SimCorp, Dyalog started the project. We decided to fund the creation of the book and provide it as a community service. So what we wanted was a completely new, up-to-date book on modern APL, and also part of it explaining the parts of Dyalog that are, besides the core language, you could say, all the additional features of the language that makes it an integrated development environment for writing applications. So how it went, I'll leave it to Bernard to tell you.
So as Gitte said, I've been for 10 years, nearly 10 years, a French distributor for Dyalog, Dyadic at that time, Dyalog now. And to be honest, I stopped in 2000 to do very different things. And because one of my former customer died, we made a little ceremony for his wife and his 2 children, his 2 sons, who were mathematicians, trying to explain why their husband and father loved APL so much. And for that ceremony, I wrote a little introductory text, perhaps 15 pages, entitled APL Vue du Ciel, with that ambiguous word, because in France, ciel means the sky. I look APL from a very high distance, but it means also heavens. That's the reason of that title. It was published on the APL, French Association for APL, later translated by Sylvia and Anthony Camacho and published in Vector, and I had 2 or 3 contacts of people who were interested. And simultaneously, Dyalog and SimCorp were searching someone to write a book, and Nicolas made the necessary, arranged the necessary context. So we met in July 2007, and we started the project. I expected at that time, I was full, to use my previous book, but my previous book was written in '94, 15 years ago. Translate what I could translate, that's impossible, that cannot be translated. And we estimated about 500 pages for the final project. We decided that it should be dedicated to users, beginners, like let's say the domain experts who formerly used to be the first users of APL. The first users of APL knew nothing about programming, nothing about computer. They were economists, biologists, and so on. And we decided that the book should be easy to read by pure users. But however, even if we start from 2 by 2, we decided to include the latest enhancements in the language. So some little tricks useful to a beginner, and also some more advanced things. For example, when I start transpose, perhaps I do not need immediately dyadic transpose. It's not, it's perhaps something I could see later. So all the chapters are divided into 2 slices. The beginner rushes through the main part of the chapter, but if 6 months later he says, what about transpose? He can see the last pages of each chapter and see that transpose also has some specific features like a dyadic version. So we tried to make something rigorous, but perhaps not too serious. We didn't want our readers to be bored by the document. So we decided to include what you call dynamic function. I said, why dynamic? Do they run faster than old? So we tried to invent some new words. We decided to use direct. Perhaps it is not better. And if we call them direct, how do we call the other ones? We spent a lot of days trying to find a name for the functions you always wrote. We decided to call them procedural. So we had many new things, many questions we never asked before. We shall integrate salt. I was extremely pleased to see that Dyalog included New Leaf and Rain Pro, because if I am a beginner, I have produced a beautiful layout. How can I print it? That's complex for a beginner. So through things like New Leaf, through Rain Pro, even if I am a beginner, I can do beautiful layouts. Also, the partnership between APL and Excel is extremely interesting. So we needed some examples in much detail, and we decided to deliver the book with some associated files, workspaces, so that the reader can download them and read the book, type exactly the same things, and obtain exactly what is should obtain the same thing he can read on the book. And Gitte and Morten took also 2 major decisions. They decided to include the little booklet I evoked some minutes ago as an introductory part to the book. It means that in that introduction, I go quickly through the beginning of APL, but up to outer product, for example. So in the first 20 pages, you have an overall vision. Is this language for me? Is this interesting for me? And after that, you enter the book and you retrieve the same examples, but with detail, explain, and so on. I think it was a good decision because if I hire a new employee and give him a book which is only a reference book, it's perhaps a bit hard. With that introduction, I think he can have in a few hours a good vision of what is APL. And they also decided to adopt a document in color. Of course, it costs a lot to print a book in color, but really the readability is excellent. We have, of course, worked on the black and white version for everyday's work. It's very hard to use in black and white. The final draft was finished last summer, previous summer, and then, yes, I wrote it in, let's say, Globish, my French English. So, my franglais. So that book could have been read probably by Japanese, Italians, Greeks, and so on, but certainly not by English and not by Americans. So we had a lot of rewriting also because I made some errors. We discovered that something should be moved from that chapter to that other chapter. And this involved a lot of contributors, Morten and Gitte, of course, John Scholes, because he was the memory of why 20 years ago we decided to implement this like that. Kim Andreasen from SimCorp, who acted really as a coordinator, and he has approximately the same vision as I have. I am not a specialist. I'm a pure user, perhaps an advanced user, but I am a pure user, and I can understand what are the problems met by a beginner when he discovers such or such feature in APL, and Kim has practically the same vision. Then Baronet, then Canadian, he speaks French. Wow. Yeah. Same fool. Adrian Smith, of course, from New Leaf and Renpro, and Peter Donnelly. I am much in debt to Peter because he is producing the final version with beautiful layout and so on. So, and in good English. Of course, all those contributors gave us a lot of good ideas. This is the portrait of a typical French APL user. We had very constructive and friendly discussions. And of course, I tried to take all these remarks into account, as you can see. But we had really an excellent team. If you look attentively, you see there is a woman in the boat. Gitte is somewhere there with the white helmet. Because of this long process of correction, rewriting, and so on, the only thing which exploded, of course, were the delays. We expected to have it ready for this conference. You have a good draft with half of the book in its final shape. We have between 800 and perhaps 20 more pages. It's not definitely sure. Probably the biggest thing ever written about APL. We just need to put the last chapter in that final shape, and Peter will do it, of course. Poor Peter. And we all hope, of course, you will contribute to the distribution of that book. Gitte?
Can you switch?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do we intend to do with this book? Well, we want to make it freely available for download, either from our website or from Lulu or maybe some other web publisher. We just discovered one thing, that the book can't be printed from the usual print-on-demand machinery because they can bind up to 800 pages or 400 sheets, and above that you're on your own. So maybe we have to cut it in 2 volumes, or maybe we can find somebody who can print more than 400 sheets. We'll see about that. Color printing, though, is prohibitively expensive if you want to print the book using print on demand. So it's like more than £100 to print 800 pages in color. But it can also be printed in black and white, of course. And then it's manageable through print on demand, if we can find one who can also bind it. It's not so enjoyable, of course, in black and white. Yep.
Why do you even emphasize that? I have stacks of manuals and books on my shelf, and I think later dust on my do you have the online version?
Well, I'm the kind of person who really don't appreciate reading stuff from the screen. I want a book. I want to be able to page back and forth, and I want to take it to bed. So, and my computer doesn't fit that way.
You're not the only customer here. What about your market? What is that the general market?
I think, probably there's about 30-40% of people who really appreciate reading books, and the rest can read it just as easily from. But I think I would prefer to have the book and then also have an online version where I could just, through the index, get it straight to the right page that I was looking for. So, yeah, Kai? Well, I would say opposite. Well, the reference manual I have online, but the user guide I would like as a book. Yeah. It depends on how you read it. If you use it solely for lookup, I'm fine with on screen. But if it's something that I read through because it builds my knowledge and my understanding, I definitely prefer a book. But not everybody have to write. But what we do intend to do is to print a first edition in full color, and if we can get pre-orders for 1,000 copies, we can print it at £20 a unit. They'll have to be shipped in addition, and they're heavy. But I think we could probably bulk ship, for instance, to the United States, and then do some kind of a courier from a central place here for all the American customers. And then shipping in Europe is not that expensive either, because you don't have to cross custom borders anymore. So I think it's possible. And £20 for a book that size. I know what my daughter just paid for her school books. And I was very interested because there was a Java book that was about the same size as the APL book, and I looked at it. You know how many pages it's got? 1,400. And it's like a telephone book. It's very silky thin sheets in there. So I'm just wondering, I don't think she's ever going to touch all these 1,400 pages, but we'll see. So what we are looking for is pre-orders, and if we get sort of anywhere near the 1,000, of course we'll chip in the last ones and make sure we have a little stock. So, but if you're interested, we'll send out as soon as we know when the final chapters, as Bernard says, is in its final condition, and we know the full extent of the book and have the PDF ready. We also know when we can ship the book, and we'll send out a newsletter and take orders. And I think that you can start thinking about who deserves a really great Christmas present. So we are soon there. So we're looking forward to that very much. The book is here in 2 copies in a sort of almost final draft. The last chapters are not been polished, as Bernard said, but you can get a feel for how the book looks and how it reads. And I think it's great stuff, because when we were doing the editing, for the first time I actually really understood the APL2 version of nested arrays. I hadn't understood that really deeply before, coming from Sharp APL, who have the boxed array or the homogeneous array. So I now understand it, and I understand how the functions apply to them, and that was a great revelation to me. So even for a very experienced user, there's something to get from this book. It's very well written, and in particular, I'd say the exercises are brilliant. I mean, they're very good at getting out exactly the thing that you're wondering about as a starter, illustrating how a problem can be solved with APL in a proper way. So I hope you look at it. You have a copy on your memory stick here from the conference, so you can browse through it and see if you think it's worth ordering or pre-ordering. That's all for us. Thank you. Yeah.
One slight correction. There is a follow-on to APL2 called APL2 several years later
Okay.
For some reason or other, it had very little info, but it's very good stuff.
Right, I'll be happy to have a look at that. Is Ray saying that there is actually a later edition from, was 98? Oh, from the 80s?
Well, anyway,
Yeah.
later, maybe it has a copy of something.
Well, we should have a look at it, but at least it doesn't come up when you Google, because believe me, I tried. Yes. Yeah, I don't know why it's not coming up. Well, that should bring it into Google now. That would actually mean that when you Google it, it should come up. Because the wiki was not published by the time before we went into this project. That has come later. But, I mean, all that stuff you put on the wiki also means that Google will find that stuff and make it available. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's very good. Yeah.
Is there an official title for this book? APL2 in depth. What's the one you want?
Yeah. I think it's going to be called an APL tutorial. Isn't that what we... That's what we've called it all along. That might change. But, okay, suggestions for names are also accepted. Send us, yeah. Yes and no. This project is a community project. The last part of the book is a dialogue thing, but the first half of it is genuine, basic APL language, APL2 dialect language. So it would be applicable for IBM and for APL 2000 or now or next or whatever. Not next, now. Users as well. And we want that because but Kai, I want them to find it when they look for APL lecture. Yeah. So.
That's an important remark, but here if I say dialogue, it means something to you. But for people who have heard about APL in a university, no, not. But somewhere they have heard about APL, so they will Google on APL or they will search information on APL, not on Dyalog. So I think it's good to associate both words. The book itself has some references to APL2 because there are some differences. Why do we have a quad ML, for example? So I have been obliged to make some references. But for example, in my previous book, I had tried to make an equal vision of Dyalog at the time, APL2 and APL+. It's impossible. So here we have a project. That project was led by Dyalog and SimCorp, so it's mainly the vision of Dyalog with the necessary references where needed. For example, I couldn't explain the GUI interface, 50 pages for Dyalog's GUI interface and 50 pages for, let's say, APL 2000. It would have been impossible.
That's a very good idea. Yeah, we should do that. So both come up when you, okay? Yes. I would say that buying the book, we don't know yet if it's at all possible to also have a like a Springer Verlag or Addison Wesley or somebody print this book. I don't know if they want to do it if we already printed a first edition. But the thing I would really dearly like to see that it got into university bookstores with either a CD with Dyalog in it or with a coupon that you could go straight to our website and get the latest educational download. Because I think we probably do want them to have the latest version always. This is what we give them today. Because otherwise you need to give them access to update what they got with the book. So yes. No. Yeah.
It's not that way. If you go to the download area, you're supposed to fill out the form.
Well, that's your choice. But letting them go to the website is probably the best way to always get more research.
Yeah.
I understand why you want it, because you want to learn who's downloading and looking.
Well, we are also giving them a fully commercial product with everything in it. So we need to know who we gave it to, basically. But we might actually be able to make a version that's more like an educational version that could be downloaded without us knowing who's doing it. Yeah.
The way IBM does it is they give them 240 minutes of CPU time for 2 years. And then when the 2 years runs out, you do it again.
Yeah, I mean, that might be an option. I mean, we don't want to hamper the product because we want, I mean, and that's the problem with APL or Dyalog, because you could say, well, what if we had this cheap version that didn't do this, that, and the other thing? Yeah, but some of the very beginners need particularly this, that, and the other thing, and some of the most, what you say, business critical applications don't use all that modern stuff. They just use the base core. And so how do you price something like this? And how do you cut stuff which might have made the day for somebody who just got started. So it's just not possible. So we want them to. Yeah, and so what about the students who are doing massive analysis of whale song? I mean, yeah, so why shouldn't that be possible? I think some kind of timeout is probably, yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure that a timeout is a good idea. Why? Because if I give to a first student, he will work 2-3 months with that, and suddenly switch the book on the diskette and the CD to another one, and 2 years later, this will still circulate. If you have a timeout, you break this circulation of information. So it would be probably a pity.
I think it might be a good idea to have an expiry that's about the time of between 2 releases, because then they can get a new one. Just apply for a new one. It's fine. Or download a new one.
Why not? Yes,
yeah.
Why not?
So we'll think about that. We are talking about having these measures put in. Yeah, Jeff?
What's the planning for keeping this up to date?
Well, electronically, yeah. We can edit this book and add more stuff as we add stuff to Dyalog on the electronic version. And then maybe, I think probably in 5 years' time, maybe we add more appendices or little booklets with the new stuff. I mean, definitely the first half of the book is the language. There's no reason to change anything there. It's all in the sort of additional software in the IDE there's a chance of changes. Phil? Yes! The day we come across huge amounts of pirate copies, we made it. Roy?
Gitte, it might be a good idea. I know you've worked real hard, picked up all the errors and the misprints, but it might be a good idea to have a particular space on the site somewhere for comments and correction.
Yeah.
There's no way
Excellent idea.
you're going to get everything from experience.
True. No, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Put a spot. Comments, corrections, all that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that suggestion. I also hope, by the way, that at some point we get to put your exercises up as well, because that's a nice continuation of the introduction. So, but I'll get back to you on that. It just doesn't happen as fast as I thought. Okay, I think we should stop now so you have a chance of getting a coffee before the next thing starts.